Right, hey guys, how are we doing? Back another video from Annie News, continuing with the cut content from Season 4 of Overlord, and I'm loving Season 4 at the moment, absolutely sick. That last episode with the Prince and the Nobles was just absolutely incredible, darkest line ever, but that's 2 episodes away from here. Can't wait to see what was cut out from that. But let's see what was cut out of Season 4, Episode 8. I'm absolutely loving Overlord and loving these.
2 whole volumes were skipped in order to bring us to where we are here.
2?
A massive arc covering Demiurge's plans to subjugate the Holy Kingdom.
Oh, what?
And while it is something that we'll see later on in the upcoming movie, there is some context that needs to be given in order to understand certain things right now. What I mean is that things like the Riestes Kingdom's dire predicament,
crazy, so much was cut.
Kingdom's sudden influence over the continent, may not make sense unless you know what happened during those prior volumes.
Right.
Long story short though, Yaldabaoth was sent to create some sort of conflict with the Holy Kingdom, which they would then have no choice but to rely on the Sorcerer Kingdom to help them resolve.
Okay.
It was a genius strategy that had a massive impact practically everywhere, especially in the Riestes Kingdom where the aftermath is causing...
Make everyone think that they need him.
So, just like how we did last time, let's take a look at what the anime left out from the novels.
Cool.
To the video. Episode 47, An Unexpected Move, covering chapters 1 and 2 from volume 14 of the light novel. Where the story starts first is the private work session Albedo was doing to manage Nazarick. Specifically a review of its stance on foreign and domestic policy within their kingdom. The former dealt with the establishment of a very intricate intelligence network, while the latter was more for handling whatever few minor crimes were occurring throughout the city.
Minor, as we see a body thrown out of a building.
Many agents from different nations were currently within a rental.
They were
all
interesting.
Of which were granted free reign to do whatever, but at the same time kept under close watch by Demiurge and Albedo. When it came to the affairs of their own people, while there was the occasional minor crimes being committed, the streets
again, that's someone getting beat up.
Others that not only could women and children walk around just fine at night, but Albedo had even found it necessary to import some of the Empire's own criminals to here. It's not like she wanted murderers and thieves on their streets, but she did feel it important to test their policy on those who did commit crimes.
Interesting.
That way,
Oh my
when
god.
a crime was eventually committed, she could approach it in the most efficient way possible.
Oh my god.
Now, the reason Albedo was so hung up on this was mainly because of how significant it was. Like, you gotta be a special kind of stupid to break the law in the Sorcerer Kingdom.
Oh yeah.
So Albedo was pretty caught up in trying to figure out whatever motive would cause someone to do that. Then, in accordance with Heinrich's triangle, Albedo knew that for every major incident that occurred, 29 minor ones and 300 irregularities would go unnoticed. It was a whole skew of issues Albedo felt the need to resolve herself.
Interesting.
Regardless of whether it was an irregularity or a minor incident, every little thing was something she wanted identified and dealt with. Thus, the reason for the mountain of paperwork she was dealing with
It's
here,
crazy, like,
it was
this
a whole month's worth of
season's just showing them well,
as for what
within the story anyway, they're doing a lot. They're doing a lot to help.
If the judgments were appropriate, along with the brief analysis into why the crime might have been committed. By focusing on that second part, not only would Albedo be able to deduce any potential problems hidden within the minds of the populace, but she could also determine if any new laws were needed. A closer look into the minds of her people definitely made understanding the state of the kingdom a whole lot easier. Aside from that though, there was a whole lot more to her job than just domestic policy. As the person in charge of overseeing all Nazarick personnel, it was her job too to solve the staff shortage that they were currently facing. Then, with economic policy, law creation, and racial harmony all on her plate as well, Albedo wanted nothing more than to just ask AINZ for guidance here. The thing is, as the leader given absolute power to handle this, not only would asking AINZ for help be a significant burden to him, but it would also show a lack of ability to handle it, making this
she doesn't want to seem like she's incapable, does she?
Since his job in the Sacred Kingdom was finished, his next task was to set up the intelligence agency.
Oh wow, Demiurge is busy bee.
Ideally, Albedo
I love Demiurge, he's so clever.
That too, but at the rate things were going, it seemed like Demiurge was going to be. And that was something she would have liked to avoid no matter what. You see, it was very important this network be handled by someone she could control. Someone who would follow her orders to the letter, all while ignoring the ulterior motives that came behind those orders. If someone like Demiurge was in charge of this network, then it was very possible he'd find out about her true intentions.
Oh damn,
an important
she can't have
secret she
that.
was keeping hidden even from AINZ. So, out of all the people she could ask in Nazarick, there was very few she could trust to handle the responsibility of this. Like, even her older sister had the potential to turn on her if she found out the truth about it. Perhaps Rubedo or Pandora's actor could suffice, but the main underlying issue was the lack of options. There simply wasn't enough personnel or money to operate at an optimal efficiency here. Now, the last thing worth mentioning from this scene is that even with Demiurge being the greatest threat from Nazarick, Albedo had gone to mention a girl who required even more caution than him. Despite being a lowly human, bringing Renner in was just as or even more risky. So that just went
I can't
to
wait for
show
her
how
to like
high
start
her
making
emotional
moves.
Moving on to Zanac's meeting next, and that's where we find out just how grave the situation really is for him. It's a bit hard to grasp considering the Holy Kingdom arc we skipped, but the overall issue is pretty much this. Due to a plethora of problems from separate incidents, it was only a matter of time until the kingdom's food production declined to a point of crisis.
Oh no.
You see, with the yield of food declining due to the lack of manpower, a basic drought was all that was needed to collapse the entire market. Then, once the supply of food can't meet the demand, the prices would increase and those closest to poverty would be the ones to suffer. Sure, they could hire druids to temporarily make it rain or provide warmth throughout the winter, but such a scheme would require every village to have a druid of its own.
Yeah.
That or a mage on par with the Empire's Triadcaster. But since the kingdom never pursued magic due to their ignorant perception of it, the amount of druids it had definitely wasn't enough for this. The nobles just didn't see it beneficial to teach the masses or their heirs anything related to magic. To them, the main source of power was strength, thus the kingdom's significant focus on knighthood. So, with zero plausible options regarding how to increase their food supply, the only out was the one provided to them by the kingdom next door to them. The Sorcerer Kingdom that had filled their vacant warehouses with all sorts of supplies. What I mean is that ever since Season 2 when Yaldabaoth had stolen all the supplies previously held in those warehouses, the space formerly held by the kingdom had now been contracted out to AINZ. Since keeping it empty was the only other alternative, the merchants who owned them were more than happy to rent the space out to another nation, one that kept these warehouses filled with supplies that anyone could buy. Of course, a customs fee would be sent back to the Sorcerer Kingdom, but if the merchants wanted, they could sell any of the provisions within it. The only issue was that the price would be a premium compared to local goods. So, with none of the population wanting to supply funds back to their enemy, these stacked warehouses would remain filled to the brim, providing a source of food that could solve the inevitable shortage, but at the same time it would fund the very people who killed 2% of their population. Then, to make things worse, these supplies which normally would have been held by the Riestes Kingdom were now being sent as aid by the Sorcerer Kingdom. Not only did this gain favor with the Sacred Kingdom who was receiving it, but it also severed any and all ties that the Riestes Kingdom previously had with them. You see, while Yaldabaoth was causing havoc to the Sacred Kingdom and its people, the Sorcerer Kingdom was the only one to...
Yaldabaoth is the name that Demiurge is given when he's wearing the mask, like pretending to be someone else, isn't it?
Refused to send any, resulting in the destruction of any relationship they previously had. Then, to make things even more worse, since the aid being sent was using the Riestes Kingdom's own roads, the convoys which carried plenty of AINZ's flag clearly dictated that the Riestes Kingdom couldn't turn down the request of the Sorcerer Kingdom. It was an absolute power move that showed who was in control here. So, just to summarize the clever plan that AINZ had concocted here, Season 2 had Yaldabaoth steal the kingdom's resources, then Season 3 had AINZ maim their workforce. With not enough workers to produce the surplus available to resupply those warehouses, AINZ then offered to fill them with his own nation's supplies. He would then have Yaldabaoth incite conflict in the Sacred Kingdom, which would then conveniently be handled by the Sorcerer Kingdom. Then, as a sign of good faith, AINZ would take those supplies currently held in the Riestes Kingdom and send them out in convoys to aid the Sacred Kingdom, resulting in this lengthy plan that alienated two otherwise friendly nations, practically subjugated yet another one, then severely hindered the independence of the last one. So that was the core problem Zanac was facing on the foreign end right now. When it comes to his domestic issues, though, in addition to an emerging faction of idiots rising in power, there was also this new social movement that was causing a bit of a stir lately. Not much was known about how it came to be, but there was known to be a mysterious woman known as the Faceless One.
The Faceless
One? A
One?
key figure who formed a sect revolving around this single core teaching. Remaining weak was a sin, and everyone must strive to become strong.
Yeah, this person's not been introduced at all.
At first glance, this may not seem like that big of a deal, but when you really think about where this mindset could lead, it was only natural for the ruling class to worry about their positions. This movement was a clear threat to their absolute authority. If the lower class gained strength that exceeded the level of its nobility, then it was only a matter of time before they would put that strength to use.
Oh god, revolution!
Now, while the Eight Fingers were still a massive threat as well, the biggest by far was the current split of the kingdom's factions. Their lack of agreement and the indecisive balance in power between them resulted in a deadlock which made decisions regarding the Sorcerer Kingdom unable to be made. The obvious play was to make themselves a vassal state, but doing that would only lead to a civil war. The nobles would never allow their power to be taken away by
no way would they.
Then, with the emerging
Considering what they
being
did
as
to
though more nobles
Zanac,
lacked
my
class
god.
or education, they were a true group of fools who caused nothing but trouble. Nobles who carried significant sway in their own domains, but were a bit too drunk on power since they'd never experienced it before. So, with them being a wild card that couldn't be controlled,
God,
there
wild
was
card
no telling
indeed.
where the Riestes
Caused so
Kingdom
much
would
trouble.
end up next. With all that said, though, there was one countermeasure in which progress was going steadily, and that was the potential coalition that would stand up to AINZ and his Sorcerer Kingdom. Though not all were in full agreement, several of the Council States Dragonlords did think that AINZ was a problem that needed to be handled,
You reckon?
resulting in this promise of mutual defense that only existed on friendship right now. So, despite not being established on paper, Zanac did hope that he could eventually make something more concrete from it. Now, the last thing worth mentioning about this meeting was Renner's defensive nature over the control of her orphanage. You see, even with Zanac offering royal funds to help with its operation, Renner insisted that the entire thing be managed by her. If another party was allowed to take part, then that would leave room later on for them to take the talented children she was trying to foster, a notion she wouldn't entertain no matter how much Zanac insisted. So, out of the 50 children already there, Renner made sure that all would belong to her. It was just as she finished making that clear that a minister would walk in bearing a report, one that depicted a situation so absurd that for the first time Renner's response had almost seemed human. The appearance of confusion on her normally reserved face was a scene that Zanac couldn't help but smile at. It reminded him that his sister could almost act as a human sometimes. Where that brings us to now is the fateful meeting which brought about that surprise in the first place. An encounter between scheming nobles whose grandiose ambitions blinded them from reality.
Yeah, the idiots.
So, if we look at Philip
Absolute
first, his main
idiots.
vice was that of greed. And while he did receive immense funding from his partner Hilma, he wasn't happy with being in debt to her. Not only did that restrict what he was capable of, but any move he made had to be directly approved by her. It was a far call from the true freedom he sought after when bringing this plan together. Then, as a man who prided himself in paying his debts, that meant his only goal was to make enough money to earn that freedom. He could only do exactly what he wanted after making the money to gain his independence from Hilma. The thing is, his genius plan to grow luxury crops then sell them at a profit was nowhere near where he'd thought it to be at. In fact, the yields within his domain were actually steadily decreasing.
Oh no.
So much so that at the rate it was currently going, paying Hilma back would
No
be
wonder he
impossible.
panicked.
So that's why Philip was so desperate to find a way to increase his profits.
Yeah.
He needed to find the fastest way to clear his debt. Now, for a bit more context on why Philip's plans weren't working, well, in addition to his people not wanting to try and grow a new specialty crop, the existence of those fully stocked warehouses placed a foothold on him. You see, because Philip's domain was stuck growing nothing but ordinary crops, he was directly competing against the stockpile of product Nazarick contracted to have within the capital. Remember, it was after Yaldabaoth had stolen the existing supplies in those warehouses that the Sorcerer Kingdom stepped in to fill them with their own. This wasn't intended to be sold within the Riestes Kingdom's market, but the Sorcerer Kingdom did give them permission to do so. Any product within could be sold at the fixed price AINZ had set for them. So, what that meant for Philip was that no matter what he grew and how much he grew of it, if the price he wanted to sell it for was higher than the Sorcerer Kingdom's, the merchants would be better off selling AINZ's
Yeah,
products.
definitely.
Then, to make things worse, the place these provisions were being kept was also protected by a magic item which preserved the food indefinitely.
Oh, okay. But do you know what? That was something I was thinking. I was like, if you're storing all this food away, surely it's going to go off. But they even thought about that. There's a spell that literally keeps it all. Fair enough.
That would remain as a foothold on the market forever. Then, to make things even worse again, even if the stock within was being sold by the Riestes Kingdom, the entire workforce of the Sorcerer Kingdom's undead allowed them to keep replenishing the warehouses to max capacity.
Mate,
It
yeah.
was so much that their single
They
city
never get
was said to
tired.
produce the same as the entire kingdom. So, once Philip heard the root of his problems lay within the Sorcerer Kingdom, that's when he knew that the only way to succeed was to get rid of their supply. Only after their provisions were no longer on the market could Philip ever hope to sell his own crops at a profit.
You fool.
Of course, Philip knew going against them was quite the risky maneuver, but him and all his genius felt that no matter the outcome, the kingdom would definitely have his back for trying to commit such an outstanding act of power.
Nope.
I mean, to him, stealing from an enemy nation was doing his country a service. So much so that he felt they would even give him a title for it.
So legit
What
idiot.
Philip
There we go.
didn't even try to consider, though, was the possibility that these two other nobles were trying to play him for their own personal gain. And that leads us to a massive section of cut content I feel might be covered later. Since we're yet to see Philip's fate, or the fate of the two nobles who spurred him, I wouldn't be surprised if we see their true motivations come to light in a flashback. That and the actual act of Philip stealing from the Sorcerer Kingdom's convoy. I know a lot of us were disappointed when we didn't get to see the infamous crane wing formation.
Oh, okay.
It will either come up in a later episode, though. I will make a solo video dedicated to covering just that.
Cool.
Now, fast forward to after the convoy was ambushed, and that brings us to AINZ's public walk with Momon. Something Nabe had to participate in as well, mainly to confirm that this wasn't just an undead corpse acting as Momon. Of the two key things discussed here, though, the first was the increased number of Demi and subhumans walking amongst the populace, then the second was the state of the intelligence arm that he was trying to build. The former pertains more to the orcs he found in the Holy Kingdom arc, then the latter was his effort to ensure the Sorcerer Kingdom was always slightly ahead of its neighboring countries. So long as their advancement was always marginally ahead of everyone else's, the Sorcerer Kingdom could maintain its position as a leading global superpower. Thus the reason for this confidential intelligence agency. He needed agents in every country reporting on all their progress and industrial secrets. The only problem was that AINZ was running out of high-level monsters to be able to
Whoa, that looks sick.
He was starting to have to look towards a more local option. If he could train human spies to report on their own country for him, then he wouldn't have to use precious data and Yggdrasil gold to summon agents of his own. Once again, though, there was a fine line on how strong he could train these agents to be. You see, if someone weak had the potential to grow into someone incredibly strong, AINZ wanted to make sure that they never got to that point. It was too risky to unlock that potential and have it...
Can't have any problems sneaking in.
Moving on to the emergency meeting now. The presence of each floor guardian clearly dictated that it was important.
Yeah, if everyone's there, it's a big deal.
Their own major task. To have them drop that and come right here was more than enough for AINZ to realize something significant had happened. An interesting thing to note before that, though, was that the place they were meeting wasn't the usual throne room. It was a brand new audience chamber that the Guardians had made themselves.
Oh.
The first room in Nazarick not to be made by someone from the guild. More importantly,
That's
though,
cool.
the clear effort made to create something of their own imagination was a pleasant indicator highlighting the Guardians' individual development. They were visibly starting to become more and more their own entities, not just slaves to the flavor text their creators had made for them. So, as he watched his friend's children grow into these independent adults, AINZ couldn't help but be proud of all the progress they'd made. Now, when we get to the root of the problem, AINZ could only see it as a classic mismanagement issue. Albedo had hired a fool to do a job that he wasn't fit for, gave that fool to an unsuspecting manager, then was unfortunately caught off guard when that new hire messed up. It was the type of personnel issue that he was all too familiar with. So,
yeah, of course, because of his job,
the eventual plot to use the carrot and the stick on an international scale. A standard plan that revolved around a basic concept, all of which led to a single crucial goal. Fabricate a reason for the Sorcerer Kingdom to get involved. Regardless of whether it's a civil war or famine, so long as the dilemma becomes too much for a nation to handle on their own, the Sorcerer Kingdom can always step up as the hero, thus giving them valid reason to enter into another nation's affairs. But yeah, that's pretty much everything that we missed from the episode.
Awesome, like 2 bloody that's a lot. It's really interesting though, like little details as well. I love the little details, like that throne room was actually not the normal place, it was built by the Floor Guardians and that. So cool. I can't wait to see what's cut from the next 2 episodes. Because episode 9 is where the guy appears at the end and it's like, what? And then 10 is a recent one with Zanac and the nobles and that. I'm loving this current season. I think it's boss. And the movie, I hope that gets a cinema release. That would be awesome. But anyway, thank you to my patrons. If you want to have your name at the end of every video I upload, links in the description to the Patreon page. $1 or more as well. That's helps support the channel. It's greatly appreciated. Thank you guys very much for that. And thank you all for watching. What do you guys think of that? What do you guys think of this? Click like, subscribe if you haven't already. Leave comments down below. Let me know what I should watch and discuss in future videos. And I'll see you guys, all you guys, next time.